Black History Month, and as always, Black people are doing it for the culture. Beyonce finally got her well-deserved album of the year. Jalen Hurts, bringing all types of 90s R&B fine, finally led his team to a Super Bowl win. Abbott Elementary, Quinta, it's only right that you give him a cameo next season. And Kendrick had the whole internet dissecting the meaning behind his halftime performance. But while we celebrate these wins, there's something happening. School districts around the country are being forced to cut African American studies, DEI is under attack, and in some states, it's literally illegal to teach certain parts of American history. Some people or politicians might frame these subjects as divisive, claiming that they make people or white students feel guilty or that they create unnecessary tension. But let's be real, it's about power. It's about controlling the narrative of white history, of American history, about deciding whose stories get told and whose get erased. Carter G. Woodson, the man who founded Negro History Week, saw this coming nearly a century ago. Carter G. Woodson wasn't just a historian, he was an educator, and he understood the deep connection between knowledge and power. And he once said that there would be no lynching if it didn't start in the schoolroom. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He knew that the way that history was taught or deliberately erased shaped how Black people were viewed, how they viewed themselves, and how they were treated in society. And that's why it established Negro History Week. It wasn't just about celebrating Black achievement. Negro History Week was an act of resistance. It was Woodson's way of countering the deliberate miseducation of Black students, of ensuring that the next generation had access to their own history. He wanted Black students to see themselves as a part of a legacy of excellence, innovation, and resistance. And while Woodson laid the foundation, it was Black teachers, especially those in segregated schools, who brought it to life. And by the 1930s, 80% of Black high schools were celebrating it. Black students didn't just memorize facts about historical figures. They debated the philosophies of W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. They reenacted the Haitian Revolution. They recited the speeches of Frederick Douglass and Sojourner. These educators were doing the work, often without resources, without support, and often at a great personal cost. And if it wasn't for these Black educators, there would be no Black History Month. So if you see a Black teacher, make sure you thank them, cash at them, even give them a hug because they deserve it. Negro History Week wasn't just about honoring the past. It was an act of defiance against a school system that sought to erase Black contributions. And nearly 100 years later, we're seeing the same fight play out again. When Linda McMahon, who is the recent Secretary of Education, was asked whether Black history classes would be allowed under his administration executive order, she refused to give a clear answer, saying that she needed to understand the breadth of the executive order before making any determinations. Now, what kind of non-answer is that? But that's how history gets erased, through silence, through avoidance, and ambiguity that forces schools to self-censor out of the fear of losing funding. When looking back at my own education, fully recognize how my school experiences kind of shaped the world that I see it today until I really attended high school. I didn't have public education. I attended private schools from 1st to 12th grade, and in many of my classes in high school, I was one of the few Black girls. And often when we were preparing for standardized tests, we had to reread a range of literature like Shakespeare, Dickens, Fitzgerald. But I distinctly remember reading one of my favorite books, Their Eyes Were Watching God, in the bluest eye in my English class, my AP English class. When we read it out loud, some of my white classmates would often complain about the dialect, as if the way that Zora Neale Hurston or Toni Morrison wrote was an inconvenience to them. And I think it was one of the first times that I really noticed how certain voices, certain narratives made people feel uncomfortable. But to give credit where it's due, shout out to Mr. O'Connell, my AP teacher. He was pretty progressive looking back at it, and he made sure that we engaged with the material thoughtfully. Experience made me think about how uncomfortable people get when confronted with narratives that aren't centered around them. And that discomfort is why I think a huge reason of why courses like African American studies and ethnic studies face so much backlash. I think oftentimes there's a common misconception that these courses promote hate speech or divisiveness, when in reality, I think they can help deepen students of color's sense of self and deepen their historical understanding and provide that necessary representation that a lot of students need. In one of my first YouTube videos, I talked about the benefits of these courses, but getting them into schools is not easy. First, they have to be approved, which is already a challenge. And then schools have to find the teachers that are actually trained and willing to teach. You need students to even sign up to get the classes, which is another hurdle, especially when schools don't actively promote them. So this all comes back to a question that Carter G. Woodson asked nearly a century ago. Are we freer today than we were in 1865? That question isn't rhetorical. Woodson was challenging us to think critically about progress, about how much things have not truly changed, and about the ways that systemic oppression adapts over time. Black History Month isn't just about celebrating. It's about remembering why we fought in the first place. And as long as history is being sought to be erased, that fight isn't over.